Hello. So today's lesson is going to be sort of a roadmap to raising a puppy or even training an adult dog. Mostly I'll talk in terms of raising a puppy, but even when I get an adult dog come to me, I still want to implement these exact same steps. What I've done is I've created sort of a flow chart that is going to demonstrate the process to you. I won't lie, this has been actually a very stressful thing to create because it's been something that's been in my mind for a long time, but having to conceptualize that in a way that people can understand has been difficult. So what I want you to keep in mind as I'm about to change cameras and talk you through it is this isn't going to be a super long video because you have the information in front of you. It's going to be more of a why than a how. Um, and what I also want to kind of stress is that this is a system that has worked for me. And I have taught to other people or guided other people through and has worked for them. I'm going to talk about why I do it this way, but I am not 100% wed to it in so much as that I'm not saying it's the only way. I'm not even saying it's the best way. It's the way that I do it, and it's a way that works for me. All right, cool. That's the front end. Let's change cameras and go through it.
Okay, so more than anything, this chart is to demonstrate the importance of foundation skills. One of the things I'm always kind of harping on about because it was drilled so deep into me when I was in the army is that excellence really truly is mastery of the basics, the very basic skills that I need to perform any task. I want to be able to perform those as a reflex response. The other reason that I like to teach everything in a sequence like this is I never want my dog to face a situation where he has no idea what to do. So I want to build everything incrementally so that when he does face a situation where he's not 100% sure on exactly what to do, he can assess that and go, okay, well, this looks like something I've experienced before. And at worst, he can default to that behavior and then I can help him figure it out from there. But if it's real life or competition at that point, his default to if it really is something I have not been able to adequately prepare my dog for, my hope is that his default behavior is to something approximating what it is I actually want him to do. So with that in mind, everything I teach the dog, I try to build on a foundation of the thing before. And I also try not to ever move on too quickly. Wherever possible, I don't want to teach any behaviors to my dog in isolation. Now, there's some things that are just nothing like anything else, and you might have to teach that in isolation. But what I want to do is to teach my dog one thing and then have that become something else and that become something else. And that is how I've tried to conceptualize that process into this graphic, right? So as I say, you now have either a PDF or a JPEG. I will have provided both of those to you. You can print this out. You can follow along because it might be difficult to follow on the screen. And you can follow this in so much as you want to. But what I want you to understand as well is that realistically, all these boxes could be interconnected. I've tried to provide kind of a flow chart, and we're going to go line by line to try and help you understand what the fuck I'm doing here. But you can add any behaviors in there, but this has been, I've beta tested this with a lot of people this has taken a long time to put together. I'm not going to lie, right? And I've sent this to a lot of people, and there's just about every behavior you might need to teach a dog for work or competition, or realistically as a very well-rounded pet. There's just about everything on this board, or a variance of it, or something approximating what you actually will need from your dog, right? So the first thing I want to explain is that when I get a new dog, puppy or adult, the first thing I have to do is establish windows for drive expression and conduct environmental exposure. So straight away, I want to start showing this dog there are times when I want you to demonstrate the maximum that you can, give as much power, give all of your energy, right? And then from that, I also get in doing that, I should say, I get my clear markers for positive reinforcement and I get my signals for liberty. But before we go down one, let me talk about the other. On the top right here, we see environmental exposure. This really is sort of 99% of your dog's life. Now, if it's a young dog, I need to be doing all that environmental exposure in order to build the best version of the dog that I can, right? In socialization, habituation, that sort of thing. But if it's an adult dog, I still need to do that to find where my problems are, right? Like if I have a 2-year-old dog to come to me, people will say, well, his critical period is long over, and that's true. But I need to continue to do all this environmental exposure to see how the dog will go in it. So nothing changes, whether it's an adult or a puppy. These processes we have to go through that. One thing that you should keep in mind is I couldn't really adequately describe it, visualize it. So I will describe it here, and it's why there's a video accompanying the document, is that this environmental exposure really should be like an arrow going both ways, because I need to find out how the dog goes in all environments, but then I also need to have the dog do all these things in all environments, okay? So environmental exposure is super important. If we find problems, we're going to use some of these things in the red boxes to help fix those problems. But we're also going to do all these red box, blue box, orange and green things in a variety of environments so that we can actually call the behavior learned. So that's all I'll talk about on environmental exposure, probably until the end. Okay. Moving back across to establishing windows for drive expression. From that, I'm going to get clear markers for positive reinforcement and signals for liberty. So my clear markers for positive reinforcement is the foundation of everything that I intend to teach the dog, right? I want to start teaching things. For me personally, I like to teach using as much positive reinforcement. I'll layer in the negative reinforcement later, right? So I have to develop a way to communicate with the dog. What I see is a lot of people get a dog and they immediately start trying to train behaviors and get the dog to do stuff. And they might immediately start trying to work on heeling or sits or whatever. And they haven't first established an effective way to communicate with the dog. So whatever your marker system, I have a very specific one and we have whole content on that. But whatever your marker system is, the first thing you have to do is teach that to your dog so that you can use it later, okay? From that marker system, I'm then also going to have to develop signals for liberty, because what we're seeing on your screen here and what you have in front of you is less than 1% of your dog's life, right? 99.9% of your dog's life, he's just being a dog. He's not under instruction from you. So the signals from liberty is what also is important. So I can open the restaurant to my dog and say, okay, like here we go, we're going to learn new stuff, and now I need you to express yourself as much as you can. And then signals for liberty where, okay, this is an environment where I just need you to relax and chill out, or this is an environment where you can go and play and go crazy, but don't expect me to be paying you for anything in this time, okay? That's really important for me to make a dog livable. So once I have an effective way to communicate with my dog what I want him to do, there's only 4 things I want to start teaching that dog. And if this is a young dog or an adult, doesn't matter. I'll probably say that 100 times as we go through this. The box work. We have an entire episode. There's multiple episodes and there's a lot of content out there about the box work. We're not going to go through how to do that, but that's a very important thing for me. I also start teaching a dog to go away to a marker board. It's a very simple thing, and the marker board doesn't have to be anything fancy. I've used in the past even a Frisbee. I use a specific marker board now, but that's not to say anybody need use anything similar. Anything that you can carry around with you and then be able to send your dog away to. The unforced force fetch, which is essentially a hold, right? And now we call it the unforced force fetch because I will teach that positively without force in the start, and that means that I can start teaching that to a puppy the moment I get it, right? I'm free shaping the idea of just holding something in his mouth, and I layer in pressure later, which we're going to talk about. The other thing is within those clear markers for positive reinforcement and in the window for drive expression, I want to teach my dog about play. And now I want to show the dog that I am someone he can play with, and so that I can later use that as a form of positive reinforcement. If the dog doesn't really understand how to use play, I can't use it as positive reinforcement. I see a lot of people trying to play tug with their dog as a reinforcer for having done behaviors that they want the dog to do, but the dog hasn't actually learned how to play that with them. So either the game is a disaster and it's one rep because the dog just wins and never comes back, or the dog isn't into the game because he hasn't been taught how to play. So that red line is the foundation skill of everything. Excellence is mastery of the basics, so we spend as long as we need to teaching those 4 things to the dog. And from those 4 things, I see a lot of people get really frustrated, and they're like, okay, I need my dog to be doing X, Y, and Z. And they're talking about things that are down here in the green that are like complex behaviors that are a mixture of lots of things, and they want to teach that in isolation. I want my dog to really be proficient at these red boxes before I move on to anything else, okay? And it's quite a natural progression that these red things become the blue things as they go down, okay? So we go down one level. The box work. From the box work, I get an article indication because I'm teaching my dog to indicate on the article in the box, and I'm able to then phase out the box and make the article what is important. Similarly, I can get toughness and resilience. Now, the box work might be just to get your dog as good as it can be, or it might be because you have a weak or problem or fearful dog and you need to toughen it, okay? So then the next thing we want to talk about is the marker board. I want to send my dog to the marker board because I immediately get my send away, which is a super handy exercise, whether it's in your game or not, being able to just send your dog to run away from you, to go to something that he may or may not be able to see, but have the dog understand he just runs away from you. That's a pretty amazing skill to have. In the marker board, I'm also going to teach my dog positions, right? Like sit down and stand. And this is, again, more about the why rather than the how. But eventually, if your dog is on the marker board, whichever one it decides to do when it gets there, it may sit down or stand. If you leave it there long enough, it will change position. And you can show the dog that this is a place where multiple positions can get reinforced. Using the marker board, I can teach my heeling and my tack heel, right? So whether you're actual proper heeling on the left or the right, or in between your legs, it's the marker board that I use to do that. What is important when you understand about the marker board in that context is that it's just really a reference behavior to teach other behaviors, right? It's rare. Like you get your place command or whatever, like being able to send your dog to a bed, which I don't have on here. But you get that from the marker board for sure. But what I prefer to use the marker board for is kind of a bridge to many other behaviors. So if I want to teach my dog to go between my legs, then I can just stand over the top of the marker board and tell him to get on the marker board, and now he's between my legs, right? So it acts as a bridge to other behaviors. And then, over time, I fade that away. The other thing I get from being able to send my dog to a marker board is the triangle. And we have a whole episode on the triangle. You can go and listen to that and understand that behavior. Okay, so we move across. From the unforced force fetch, I get my hold and I get my bite. So I'm essentially just teaching a dog to hold something calmly in its mouth. Once I have taught that, this is an exercise where I then will start teaching my dog about pressure, and it's where I will use communication level pressure. So my dog already knows how to hold something in his mouth, and for no reason he finds himself under an amount of pressure that is not even at this point worthy of being called negative reinforcement. It's just a stimulus that he's aware of, but it doesn't compel him to do anything. Then he does the action that we've asked him to do because he's doing it for positive reinforcement, and he notices that pressure turns off when he performs the behavior. And so in that way, I use the unforced force fetch as one of my earliest ways to teach the dog that he is in control of pressures that are seemingly unknown to him how they're applied, right? The pressure goes on, he is in control of turning that off, and this is the perfect exercise to teach him how to do that. And then, over time, that pressure can become actual negative reinforcement where it does compel him to action. And at that time, your pressure is an activation signal into a behavior that he knows, okay? That's something we could talk about for a day and still have more to talk about on how that works, okay? But that, in the unforced force fetch, is where I first teach a dog about pressure into and out of behaviors. Through play, I'm going to start putting my dog on the back tie, and the back tie is a great way to toughen dogs and to teach them about independence, but that's the next line down. But I need my dog to accept being on the back tie and understand that he can and should pull into it, right? He should show me that he wants to pull into his harness or whatever he's wearing to get things that he wants. And that's part of the gameplay, right, is that pushiness. On the through play, I'll teach my dog that he can move towards pressure. So in the game, I don't want my dog to always be running away and I can show sort of pressure signals and show my dog that he should confront them. And I do that in the gameplay, where the same way that I wrestle with my 4-year-old son, it's the same thing like that I'm going to show my dog, is that things can get a little bit tough and we're still having fun while that's happening, but you should move towards the pressure of getting tough in order to win. And then through play, I get my treat chase and luring. Okay, so because for me personally, I like to shape as many behaviors as I can, and certainly the box work, the marker board, the unforced force fetch, I'm going to shape all those things, and from them I'm going to get other behaviors that really provide a minimal input from me. But what I have learned, certainly from experience of never having shaped a young dog and presenting conflict of food too early, is that you can get to the point where a dog will no longer follow a lure. Like my personal dog will not follow a food lure because too early he was shaped everything that he knows he was shaped how to do. And too early I presented the conflict of food, and he was expected to ignore that food. So now when I show him food to try and lure him, he expects that it is anything other than that he should do, right? So that's something that I definitely want to include here, is the luring and the treat chase. And if you can imagine from that box, there really should be, that's connected to every other box wherever necessary, because you use that for positive reinforcement and to actually teach them. Okay, so let's go down one. And the reason we're doing these kind of layer at a time is because we start to get double ups at this next layer, in the orange level there. We start to get double ups where I'm going to start putting together multiple things. So again, it's like I say, that I want my dog to really understand things in isolation, and then I can bring them out of isolation and put two behaviors together and have my dog understand within a couple of reps, like, oh, this is like one thing and the other thing mixed together. I know these two things, and the combination of the two creates a third behavior. Okay, so if we go down one, by having the article in the box, I'm starting to get things going in my scent work, right? And I can imprint scent in that way. And that's not to say that I will necessarily imprint all the scents or teach my dog about scent discrimination in the box, but it shows my dog that he can and should use his nose to be active with it. And from that, I can start to imprint in the box if I like, or I can use scent tubes or, whatever. Through toughness and resilience, I'm going to teach my dog about focus and commitment in the box. One of the main reasons that we use the box is so that I can teach my dog to commit to a behavior. Because the commitment to a behavior, it doesn't necessarily matter which behavior I teach him to commit to. Commitment is commitment, and he then will be able to, that neural pathway will go into other behaviors. And I choose to teach that in the box and use it in other places. Okay. So then we go across. Once I can send my dog to a marker board, and this happens very, very quickly. If you're teaching this in a sterile environment, you now have a send away. But every time you click, or mark, you use your markers for positive reinforcement. The dog has to come back to you to take that reinforcer. Everything that we're talking about here is done in a click release manner, right? So the dog comes, like the marker is terminal, the dog has finished the behavior and comes back to you. Later, you can create stability by, feeding in position or rewarding in position. But as I'm teaching these things, I want them coming back. So every time I do a send away, my dog is running away from me to get to the marker board if it's still visible. Every time I give my marker for positive reinforcement, that will be an indirect reward to the dog at that point. He has to come back to me to get it. So I get a recall. I get that behavior for free. From the send away to the marker board, I get my obstacles, right? Because when I can send my dog to one marker board, I can then send him to another from that one. And anything that's in between those two marker boards is an obstacle the dog will have to teach himself to negotiate in order to complete the behavior. So, this is how I teach jumps and tunnels and anything else that you have to teach your dog to negotiate, any sort of obstacle or any sort of environmental problem that you might come across. You can use two marker boards to teach the dog that he must go through and negotiate those obstacles. And then from there, you can capture the moment when the obstacle is being negotiated, and you can put that on command, and you can ditch the marker board. So before too long, when my dog first starts to jump, it's just because there is an obstacle between two marker boards. And as he is going over the jump, I can mark at that point and show him that the actual thing that he is learning is to negotiate the obstacle, not actually to get to the two marker boards. And of course, my marker board, the ability to send him there, that might be damaged a little bit because I'm reinforcing regularly without the behavior being complete. And that's kind of the point in this, is that a lot of these behaviors can then be disposable and then rebuilt later. Okay, so then when I have an area search, when I have a send away, that will also give me an area search where I can send my dog to a particular place to begin searching. That's a very handy skill to have, especially if you're in the sports where you have to, that really essentially is you're running the blinds. And if you're in sports where the dog might have to search behind a vehicle or something like that, while you as the handler stay in a set position, that is just a send away that results then in a search once the dog is in the area of the send away. Right? Okay. When we go over the triangle comes down in here and gives us head positions, target pointing. We've been through all of that, and the triangle gives me my call off. There's a whole episode on that. Go listen to that. Okay, so from the unforced force fetch, now I've taught my dog to hold and to bite. Well, every time I reinforce him, he has to let go of the thing that I've taught him to hold, and from that I can get my out, and my out can become reflexive. I prefer to teach my dog to out on things that he's happy to let go of, right? That, like if my dog's holding a metal pipe or a broom handle or something like that, he's only doing that he's only doing that because it has the value that I've given it. And I've only given it the value of the reinforcer that will come. So when I click, my dog spits that thing out very quickly because he's only holding it because it's to get the food, and now the food's available. Well, that's the type of out that I want. I want my dog to spit things out that he does want as reflexively, with the same reflex that I developed when it was something that he intentionally wanted out of his mouth. And I get that from first teaching him the unforced force fetch, then to hold, and from the hold I get my out. When my dog can hold something in front of me and I show him that there's value in doing that, then I can very easily just put that thing not in front of me and give my command. And in that way, I'm just back chaining my retrieve, right? So if the end picture of my hold is you sitting in front of me holding a pipe in your mouth, well, and you understand that's what brings reinforcement, it's a very easy step then to put the thing, away from being in front of you and ultimately being able to be thrown, and the dog understand I need to get that and bring it back to the boss and sit in front of the boss. So we're back chaining the retrieve, and that comes from the unforced force fetch through the hold. Okay, and then as we said, we talked about here the pressure into and out of behaviors in the unforced force fetch. I'm going to later use that to create calm biting. So what I'm going to do is link up my hold and my calm biting. There probably could be an arrow from down there, right? And that will show that when my dog can become hectic on the bite, the pressure that I've used to create the hold, or the unforced force fetch, is going to be able to be used to calm him down on that bite and bite, and show him that the way you bite things that you really, really do want to bite is the way that you should also bite this metal pipe or this broom handle or whatever it is that I've been teaching him to hold. And that's as hard as he can, but calmly, right? Like, and what we would say, biting, not fighting. Okay. So once my dog can accept the back tie, I can start using that to put pressure on his grip, and I can teach him to bite harder, and I can teach him to bite with his back teeth, because here in the hold, I'm not so concerned about where he's biting. With the back tie, I start showing him like, hey, you need to bite with your back teeth and re-grip every time you get the opportunity, and that sort of thing. Once my dog can start moving towards pressure, that's going to show him some independence, right? And I need my dog to not be a sook, and I need the dog to have confidence in and of himself, and I get that from the idea of moving towards pressure, thinking that he can confront things that are difficult. And then on the back tie is where I'll teach my dog about aggression. So this is no longer me playing, but it comes from play. This looks like something the dog has experienced his whole life, and through the back tie, a helper or a decoy can start showing the dog about aggression. And the dog now knows independence, he has a strong grip, and he can start pushing a decoy around and learn that he, through his aggression, can control the decoy. Now, if you are just doing pet dogs and you have no need for that, cool, you have no need for that, right? All right. So then the next layer down is where things start to sort of all come together. When my dog understands his nose is something that can lead him to reinforcement, that's when I can start to teach my dog about tracking, right? And so that comes through the box, ultimately, is how I teach a dog to track. With focus and commitment, I can now start using that to teach my dog about pressure into behaviors, as well as up here under the unforced force fetch, right? With a recall, that is just weight pull, but now we're adding in back tie, right? So I've taught my dog that you can and should pull against things. And now I tell him to recall, and he should think that if I actually call him out of the back tie, he should be able to drag the back tie with him, and that's weight pull. Defensive handler, we talk about, well, that's just heeling, and that's head positions, right? So we can now unlock our dog from the heel that we taught him and use head positions through the triangle. And also, if we're going to go into like a transport over here, we'll talk about directional sends in a minute, but that's a similar thing, right? That's heeling and aggression and moving towards pressure, right? There's a lot of things that feed into that. Directional sends, right? Like if I have two decoys and I want my dog to bite one over the other, I can teach my dog that he should go to a particular, like when there's two things that look similar, or even if one is more appealing to him than the other, with directional sends, I can send him to one decoy over another. But that starts all the way back up here of teaching him to go to one marker board over another, right? So that's what I get from there. Wall climb, if you're going to get into that kind of thing, that's just a retrieve and grip, okay? So all you're doing in wall climb is if you have the foundation of play, back tie, grip, as well as the hold, then the retrieve, then that is wall climb, and you teach the dog, go get that thing, grip it, pull it back, and now bring it back to me. Grip issues is something that most dogs are going to come up against, especially if you don't have, eventually your dog will bite a decoy that is learning or is not as proficient as you might like. And the calm biting, as well as the back tie, and there's multiple things that feed into here. It gets a real mess down here, and I kind of did that semi on purpose to show you how so many things feed into these more complex behaviors. Fixing grip issues is something that calm biting, pressure into the calm bite, right? And that comes from the unforced force fetch. Muzzle work. Muzzle work is just aggression, okay? And that comes from the back tie, comes from play. The object guard. Now, that's a funny one, right? Like that can come from the marker board, right? I've got line that goes all the way to the marker board, and it's biting over a marker board, right? And then your bark and hold's a funny one, right? Like that can come out of many places. The back tie moving towards pressure. Moving towards pressure will create aggression, and when you can create aggression through frustration, and then that can create the bark and hold. So I've kind of rushed through this because like you have this in front of you now. You can print this out and you can come to understand it. But the whole point of this document and this video is for you to understand that where I think is a problem is when I see people start trying to teach these behaviors in isolation, okay? These bottom behaviors. If you just start, okay, I want to teach a wall climb, right? Or I want to start teaching my dogs directional sends. Well, all those things rely on the dog knowing other things, and then it becomes very, very easy. If you were to teach a dog wall climb in isolation, you would have a very hard time convincing your dog that it is worth jumping as high as he can and scrambling up a wall in order to get something if you haven't first played with him in doing that, and then he's got to know what to do with it when he's got it, right? And you're catching him at that point in wall climb, but he has to understand that it's in order to get and give to you, because you're going to have to use your out in order to get it off of him, right? So all these things, if you take anything away from this video, what I really want people to understand is that you should develop a strong foundation in every behavior that you want to teach your dog. The longer that you spend in developing that foundation, the easier all these other things will be to teach. So you can go ahead and teach the very complex things, and they might take you 6 weeks to teach. And if you just spent 3 weeks teaching the marker board and three weeks teaching the unforced force fetch, you get those behaviors anyway. So you get a lot of utility from a strong foundation. And as like the main thing that I want everybody to understand is that I never want my dog to have no idea what to do, because that's an extremely stressful position for the dog to be in. I want to have taught my dog every behavior in increments through other behaviors that he has a reference point to fall back on if he truly is confused. And hopefully that reference point approximates what I wanted him to do anyway, or it gives him a place to get back to think and listen into me and have me be able to give him direction to go from there. All right, I think that's it. I'm not going to carry on about this too much because you have the document in front of you. Like I say, uh, feel free to adapt this and change it to be whatever suits you. There's probably a lot of behaviors on this, on in this flowchart that you may never need. But I think that the whole point is why I really have bothered to go to all this length is because of this layer here, the red layer of doing the box, teaching the dogs to send to a marker board, doing the unforced force fetch, and playing with your dog. Because from those things, you will be able to teach your dog just about anything that you need to. All right, that's it. Good luck.